I'd like to open the meeting of the Tiverton Town Council and the Tiverton School Committee and Budget Committee. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to welcome everybody here. For those who are new, I'm Denise DeMedeiros, Chairman of the School Board, but I believe everyone does know me. I'd like to welcome the new Town Council members and the new School Committee members. I'm very sorry, new Budget Committee members. I'd like to welcome Joe Amaral and John Laughlin. I was looking for Wally, and Senator Falak. This was requested by the Town Council to meet jointly and discuss budgets. The School Committee is prepared to give a brief summary of our budget, if that's the way you'd like us to begin.
Why don't you? Why not waste any time? Let's go.
Okay, Bill?
Yeah, I handed out prior to the meeting, there's a packet. Basically, it's a brief summary or an abridged version of our presentation that I gave the School Committee last week. The first page is just a reminder of the restrictions that we are now under with the new tax cap legislation this year. Our budget cannot exceed a 5.25% increase from the previous year. And what that means is on page 2, just kind of to break it down into a formula of sorts. It's our capital budget and operating budget from the previous fiscal year times 5.25% would equal our net increase in dollars. And below that little formula is the actual dollar amounts plugged in. And the $963,120 is what you see there. That's our actual new dollars that we have this year in our budget based on the cap. On the next page, the third page, is a list of our major categories minus salary. We are currently in negotiations and didn't feel it would be appropriate right now to be putting it out for public consumption, but there are these other areas in the budget that have fueled our increase, and I'd like to point out the first one. It's no surprise, is our benefits. Our benefits has increased 19.9%, and that's attributed to two factors in our budget. Retirement for certified and non-certified staff. This year, for the first time, we now have to make a contribution to non-certified staff members, Council 94. I believe, Robin, that's $50,000. It's a $50,000 line item that we never had to contribute before until this year. I spoke to Representative Laughlin about it earlier in the year to get some clarification as to where it came from, and it had to do, I believe, with the solvency of that particular retirement fund that they needed.
Interestingly enough, they said the fund was underperforming. How that fund could be underperforming when the stock market's at record levels, I still haven't gotten a clear answer to. But as soon as I do, I'll make sure I pass it along.
And the other piece is our health care, which has gone up. Well, we're projecting 17% increase. Last year we had a 2% increase. So those two line items in our benefits line item portion of the budget has significantly increased our budget. I want to say 95 to 96% of that dollar amount that I showed you on page 2 of new dollars gets eaten up in this one line item. 99%, Robin's whispering to me. So that doesn't leave us much left for new items or new purchases or anything like that. The second line item is that's increased significantly with supplies and materials. That can be attributed primarily to fuel costs. We took our best guess. If anyone could have a crystal ball and see into the future, I would be happy to talk with them and try to get a handle on it, because it really is difficult to project what fuel costs will be with the situation in the world the way it is today. In our budget, it's important to know that our total budget has gone up right now, as is 9.5%. That includes the salary portion as well. In the budget for 07-08, there are no new staff members. We're not planning on hiring anybody. And we've also, in this budget, laid off, or will be planning on eliminating, 4 positions? Mm-hmm. 4 full-time positions throughout the district just to get to 9.5. Now, I'm not going to the next page, I should say, is what, and I put it in here, it's important to know what the needs of the district are. And keep in mind, we did not put any in the budget. We did speak with the principals. We have pages and pages of documentation as to why these positions are needed. But in order to put them in the budget, we would just go much farther over that 9.5%. We'd be looking at a significant double-digit increase. So these are all the requests that were not put in the budget, currently in the budget, and I'm not going to go into the dollars, and I'll be happy to answer any questions as to why we need things. But the next few pages, you can see capital. One is technology. You see licensing fees and various items that we need for technology in the district. And then an ongoing capital plan for the high school. Bleachers, seats, refurbishing seats in the auditorium. Our lease here at the high school for our intercom system that was 40 years old and needed to be replaced. The roof over the admin building. And the sound system for the high school gym so people can hear us at graduation. Middle school requests. And again, if anyone has any questions as to what the needs are for, I think it's self-explanatory. For a total capital request of, right now, $252,163. The committee then looked at possible reductions. And again, the committee at the last meeting looked at the budget but took no action before we submitted it to the budget committee, with the intent that we will be making formal reductions over the next month or so. And you can see from teacher in service, the elimination of that, 2 days, a school career coordinator, community service coordinator, gifted and talented at the middle school, world language at the middle school, eliminate French potentially at the high school as a language, a tech ed position, and a consumer science. To date, that only totals about $553,387, where we need to get at least another $500,000 in cuts to get to the number we need. And that's not including capital. If we're including capital, we would need another $800,000.
The school committee did look at these reductions and didn't feel that we felt comfortable making these reductions at this time. Some of these reductions will hurt the education in Tiverton. So we just wanted to see if we could find other places where we could take from.
And the committee did authorize me to speak to our attorney to see what legal avenues there are, not Carullo, but the other possible legal avenues to take, looking at the new legislation, seeing what mandates we can work with to seek relief from, and any other avenues there might be. And that's pretty much where the school committee left it last Tuesday.
Now, there are possible reductions in our capital requests because the bond, the high school bond, the high school project is pretty much completed. And we're looking into the monies that is left over from that bond. There looks to be, there will be a surplus, so some of these cap requests may be able to be put into that bond. Correct, Bill?
Yes, we have approximately, I met with Mr. Marks last week, along with the lead principal from Secosio and Associates, our architectural firm doing the work at the high school, and our numbers estimate to be about $250,000 right now. But as as I mentioned to the committee, I'm leery of committing any funds right now until we get a better handle from Alborg, our principal contractor, as to what kind of, what the budget actually looks like at the very end. We're still working with them to get those dollar amounts.
The only other number that's up in the air in this budget is we are in teachers' negotiations. We will be seriously going into teachers' negotiations within the next few months. So there are possible reductions there. But you all need to realize that that will be a struggle for us, and we need the support of everyone in this town, including the town council, if we make severe reductions there. It'll be a long summer if that's what we plan on doing. But I like to say clearly right now, the school committee will need support from everyone if that does happen. I was involved in negotiations last time. It's a difficult thing, and it's difficult when we're making decisions like this. And we need the support of everyone if that does happen.
And the other document that you have, Robin gave out, it's the multicolored document. That is a line item, budget item, where you can see what was budgeted from 0304 to what we're currently proposing. And on the far right, you can see the increase or decrease from the previous year.
I think one other area, Bill, to highlight, if you will, is the area around the Rogers tuition
Yeah.
and expenses, and especially for the benefit of our legislators, because if you don't know, we made a conscious decision a couple of years ago to try to rein in some costs to primarily send our kids part-time, except for those who are already full-time in the full-time program, and provide them with a general academic program here, have them go to Rogers for the specialty programs, which should have saved a significant amount of dollars. But since that time, there have been efforts on the part of Newport, it seems, to add in costs that legitimately, I guess, some of them they can add in. But the best example I have is part of the additional cost now is for transportation, which we have to pay them a certain percentage for pupil transportation, but we don't get the transportation that's provided from them. We still have to provide our students with their own transportation. Am I accurate in that, Bill?
In the formula for the state, it's a very difficult formula to understand, but one of the components is what's called non-instructional costs for the host district, which would be Newport. Non-instructional costs would be things like transportation, costs of administration, heating, fuel, a number of items that go into that. Historically, I shouldn't say historically it's been uneven. For full-time students, Newport's been pretty consistent. You have to pay non-instructional costs because your children are there full-time. You pay that non-instructional fee. With part-time students, prior to this year, and Robin, correct me if I'm wrong, we had a 3-year window where our part-time students just paid tuition. That is, you paid per class. This year, for the first time in 3 years, we are paying what's called non-instructional costs, that extra fee that they would add on to full-time students. I believe right now, for this year, it's around $3,800 per student times 17 part-time students. Now, when we built our budget, we built it as we had built it the previous year, and I'm talking about this year now. We didn't build in any non-instructional costs for our part-time students because, really for the last 2-3 years, we felt, we weren't getting billed, so why do we expect that? Well, lo and behold, we got our November bill, and there it was. Now, I've talked to our attorneys, and they believe that the host district has the option of saying to sending districts, you pay non-instructional costs for part-time students, or you can't, or you don't have to. So we're kind of at Newport's mercy right now as far as that aspect of it goes.
What's the total cost per student at Rogers, full-time and part-time?
A full-time student can range from $14,000 to $20,000, depending on the number of courses that they take at the Career Center. In other words, if they're our full-time students are running us close to $20,000. For our part-time students are about.
Depending on the number of periods that they're there, many of them there are 2 or 3 periods a day. It's probably closer to $7,000 or $8,000.
Now, keep in mind,
including the $3,800, or plus the
that's just the tuition.
That's
just the tuition.
period,
So
yeah.
total about.
Now, keep in mind, our
Yes.
our per pupil cost is $10,900.
And that 38 is on top of it, correct?
Right.
Regardless
The
how
30
many,
the
no
30
matter how many
regardless of-
classes they
that's
take,
correct.
that 38 is on
That's
top.
correct.
So if they take one class, that 3,800 is
That's
on
correct.
top of it.
And Paul, most part-timers just take 2. So the 17 part-time students, most of them are just taking 2 classes a day. And each one, we get their name, their tuition, and then plus the $3,800, the non-instructional costs.
Has there been any other look at perhaps doing an exchange program with the students at Diamond over the border, only because I say that by the time a student leaves Tiverton High School, goes to Rogers and back, you're chewing up a good 45 minutes. A report came out recently of the Newport County, Newport vocational program, which was deficient in many areas, and they're going to close certain portions of their program because they don't have either the facility or the upkeep, and that's really not, it's probably not their fault, because you have Davies and other places around the state where the state funds it 100%. There's definitely definite inequalities. But even if it was funded at 100%, it probably educationally would not be the best thing for students here in Tiverton to transport all the way down to the far end of Newport, and just the time that it takes to get there and back has been one of the, even since I went to school, it was one of the major detractors of kids who were interested in participating in those programs. But I know last time we talked, we thought about perhaps doing an exchange program with Diamond, where they might have some students that border the pond that really are landlocked by Tiverton, that are really Fall River residents, and we might be able to have some of the Fall River slots at Diamond to try to offset the cost. Has that been a practical alternative?
We've talked, it precedes myself as even principal here, and our attorneys can look at it again, but the commissioner has ruled that our students need to attend Rhode Island career centers, and that he, and I don't have the decision in front of me, but Mr. Attorney Robinson did seek the commissioner's ruling, I believe it was 94, 95, seeking direction on it, was told that our kids couldn't go there. Now, he may have, we can still ask for another opinion, because it's a few years later, but he's been pretty consistent with that. Now, we are looking at, there is a meeting, I believe, on the 22nd at Rogers, I believe it's at 2 o'clock, to talk about the reform efforts for the career centers in the state. I believe there's 2 proposals. One is the 3 Davies, one in the East Bay, one in the West Bay, so it's equitable, versus multiple smaller career centers closer to, have 10 to 12 around the state versus just 3. And I know they're rolling back, we'll be discussing it, I should say, next week down at Rogers. So I definitely will be attending that to, to get a better feel. But right now, that is a problem for our students, is the geography of where Tiverton is. And it's also a problem for a lot of Portsmouth students, that's still a decent ride on a bus.
Well, I think probably the alternative to that, if you're going to be in discussions, is to look at utilizing Newport County Special Ed region of Little Compton, Portsmouth, Tiverton, and Middletown, and forming if the state's going to be pushing forward with that agenda, that they look at a housing facility that's more like Tiverton or Portsmouth.
Well, I think what they're looking at is to use current, and there were preliminary discussions so far, using existing schools and existing programming, and maybe expanding what like maybe Portsmouth offers something, or could offer something, maybe Tiverton could, something like that. Use your existing facilities, because from what I gathered from when the commissioner spoke to the superintendents, was that it's an issue of funding. I mean, the Davies option might be nice, but I mean, that's a big price tag attached to build at least 2 more of those, never mind 3, in the state. It'd be very costly tuition-wise. So, I think this is where that other option's coming from, is to try to make it better, but also to minimize your cost to improve it.
Well, if the delegation feels that, your lawyers feel that they can't do it, I think we'd probably be willing to put in legislation to permit, under certain conditions, border communities from being able to traverse the border and go to a very reputable program, which Diamond is.
Most definitely.
It's better for the kids, for Tiverton kids, and it's a very good program. So if we have to legislatively enact legislation to permit, under certain conditions that protect the schools, because in this area of the state has been woeful in providing funding for career technical programs. They've done a Cadillac job with Davies, and it's a fine program, but either because of lack of interest or other diversions, they have not funded or put an emphasis in properly funding the program here in Newport County. So that's something that, with that in mind, I think we might have some leverage in order to provide legislation that might help our students here.
I'll be happy to talk to Attorney Robinson and then report to you and the other reps and Senator Phelan on it.
Bill, that's a good idea, Joe. Just to get my arms around some of the numbers that you have given to us, am I correct at this point? And I understand that all budgets are preliminary at this point, and certainly including ours. But am I correct that right now you're looking at an increase over and above last year, including the capital request of about $1,763,000?
Our capital would be what,
Well,
your
the
capital?
reason how I got to that number was 5% was 963,120. Then you said we would have to cut our budget by 500 more, and 800 if we cut capital
I think
request.
No, it's, I'll let Robin explain it, but we're 1.3 million over with our capital, including our
Okay.
2.2.
2.2 overall.
2.2, but we're over the cap by 1.3.
Correct.
Yes,
Yes.
overall, 2.2.
2.2. Okay,
It's on the
so
last
another
page of this one
500.
here. It's on the last page of this one.
But that's operating, it doesn't
Yeah,
include
that,
capital.
this doesn't include capital.
The capital has this increase in it.
Right. I just,
I think it would be closer to 1.6. I think we
1.6 instead of my
1.7.
1.7?
Yes, it's 1.3 and another 300,000. I think.
Okay. Roughly. You have, Bill, your retirement in healthcare, you said comprised about 99% of this 963,120?
That's correct. If you add retirement,
Right.
certified of 266,215, non-certified of 43,956, and then take our health care at 594,064.
Yes.
That brings us...
And you're projecting a 22.2% increase in healthcare?
That's correct. And Robin, you want to explain why it's above the 17?
Right now, our increase is going to fall somewhere between 17 and 25% for the town and the school. I was using, I read a letter to the school committee when we were originally budgeting this from our a representative that we work with at GHDRI. We're using 17% cautiously. The reason that you see a 22% increase is because we've had some people get married during the year, bring spouses on, lifestyle changes, people retire, and we fill the positions and they require health insurance. So that's the differential between the 17 and the 22%. But the 17 is a base cost on the net amount of the health insurance less the employee copay.
Less the copay.
What's the percentage of the copay right now?
They're at 8%, I believe, right now. It's a flat dollar amount in Tiverton.
Say $1,100 for a family plan, $650 for a single.
That's the
That's for teachers.
That's the teacher.
You have a way to go. All of us.
As we said, it is a work in progress. I think you're...
Yes. And maybe I'd ask the administrator, obviously, we all know that for the next couple of months, we're going to be working to deal with our tax cap rather feverishly. So the council has had one real meeting to sort of look at where we are, what reductions are available to us. But I have another meeting scheduled on the 29th to keep working at it. But perhaps I'd ask the administrator just to look at an overview of town side of this budget. And then I think we should ask the legislators to sort of give us an overview of what the legislation and situation looks like in Providence.
Last year, as everybody here was involved in the budget remembers, the goal was 5.5. That was the mantra. And in fact, on the municipal side, we reduced basic services in general. For instance, we reduced our paving to $125,000 when we recognized we really need about $500,000 a year just to pave our roads to keep up to speed, not to get ahead of ourselves and have our roads in better condition. We did have one benefit last year that we experienced a 2% increase in health care, but we also had been involved in contract negotiations, which actually, because of the contract negotiations, basically reduced our overall budget increase to about 1.5 to 2% when you took into consideration salary and health care. So we had that benefit. This year we're not going to have that salary negotiation benefit. Most of our contracts, for instance, the Teamsters will call for a 3% salary increase. The ASME, which represents our general government employees, at 3%. Our fire department will be roughly at 3%, though they have a split year in the way they calculate their fees, and the police department is under negotiations right now. But we are anticipating the same amount. Now, what we've been trying to do as part of the budget negotiations, as Council's direction, is to not only increase doctor co-pays, but also to increase the co-share. For instance, under co-pays, we're trying to, for instance, one union, if they agree to what we wish this year, will be able to reduce our health care costs by 6% before the rate increase is calculated in. And we're anticipating that in our budget increase for health care. All of our co-pays are changing again this year, where the employees will continue to pick up increased co-pay costs for doctor visits. And they're also increasing their co-share in sharing the burden of health care costs in general. We went from having the fire department paying absolutely nothing in co-shares this year, last year, to now this year it'll be $800 and some for family, $400 and some for $425, I believe, for single, and at the top year of the agreement it'll be $1,040. So this is also allowing us to reduce some of our calculation projections for health care increases. Now, what Robin was talking about earlier when she was hitting her 17% number and 22%, we're about mid-year and looking at what our experience rating is through Blue Cross Blue Shield, and frankly it's been an ugly year. Now, it doesn't mean our employees are misusing their health care. In fact, I know the school department and the town government are looking at promoting better care by employing Muni Blue, which is a program being rolled out by Blue Cross to get our employees to more wisely use their health care benefits. But if we have 2 or 3 employees or children or their spouses experiencing cancer, it just literally blows us right out of the water. And on the town side, we've had a couple of these incidences which have really negatively impacted our experience rating. Last year, the town had the better experience rating versus the school department. This year, it's in reverse. Where this will stand when the final calculations comes, I don't know. But definitely it's not going to be as good as it was the previous year. We went from the managers putting a increase of a budget in of roughly $15.4 million. We are now down in about $1.5 million over what we budgeted or was appropriated to spend last year. So we have basically reduced the 25% increase now down to about 9.6% increase. So we're looking at a budget shortfall of about $1.2 million. And if you calculate the 5.25% property tax rate, which would give us about $640,000 to $650,000, we're still short $535,000. Now the challenge is, where is this going to come from? Does this mean reducing city services again? Does this reduce what the hope is to bring another code enforcement officer to address life safety issues and make sure that everybody is treated the same way when it comes to code enforcement? We've added on a full-time planner to better plan and hopefully take advantage of grants. We're still hoping to add on a full-time finance officer to assist a the treasurer in assisting in managing a $13 million budget. We are looking, for instance, when you look at capital, last year we budgeted $324,000 in capital. Department heads and commissions have requested almost 1.6. We're at $528,000. Realistically, I could argue we should be at $1 million just to keep up with replacement of our fleet, whether it be snow plows, dump trucks, fire trucks, or ambulances. We are not gaining ground, we're falling behind. Now, today I spent several hours going through where we stood, that 6-month window, reviewing where we could slice off another $118,000, which another budget document was presented to the council tonight. But our budget there is a challenge. As I said to you earlier, we're not keeping up with our paving. We may take the risk and the gamble to reduce our plowing and sanding account and pray very hard, like I did this year, that we don't have much snow, and so far that has
Nice job on that, by the way.
worked out real well.
That has worked out well. Thank you.
But it is a challenge. I mean, there is no room in the municipal budget for mistakes. There is no room for that major storm or storms that would hit us. We would be quickly deficit spending. There is no room to do significant improvements to our recreational facilities and our buildings. There is no money, and there's no rabbit in the hat that this town administrator is going to pull out to resolve that issue. I know when we talk with the council in January, we'll be talking about fee increases, personnel reductions, but we need to buy the capital equipment to do the job. I mean, that's the bottom line. Our snowplow fleet is basically close to antique status, and this past about a month ago, we were without a second fire rescue truck because we didn't even have a backup rescue truck, and we were dependent on Portsmouth for their generosity. I will tell you one thing that you may want to look at as legislators is to look at the fees that are actually established and mandated by state law, which limits us in some of the fee reports and collections that you set the fees. I don't know when they were last addressed, but some of these fees that the police and the fire have talked about are relatively low. So you may want to take a look at that. It's not going to be a windfall, but every dollar counts, especially when it comes to state fees that are established on services that municipalities provide. Other than that, Madam President, I don't have too much more to add.
Okay, well, that's a preliminary review, and as I say, we are still struggling. We have not...
Excuse me, Madam President, there is one item that is still sitting out there for both the school department, and I've talked with Mr. Rearick in the past as a school resource officer. We have talked with the federal officials today. They have agreed to extend the grant date, which will give us money up through mid to late December of 2007. So there will be a need for a 6 months worth of salary to fill that position, or continue to fill that position. But to let everybody know, the town has been subsidizing that position over the last 3 years to up to $25,000 a year. And as part of the agreement with the federal officials, we are required to fund that 1 full year after the money expires. So, I mean, that's a good discussion I think we need to have between the school department and the town, how we wish to continue funding that position, which I think everybody agrees is a win-win for everyone.
Go ahead, Sally.
Yes, I'd like to welcome everyone here to your school and tell you all that I find this very disheartening. This is our 3rd year we've all come together. And if you know how to kick or hit or catch a ball, you won't be able to count the zeros in your contract. Or if you're the head of Home Depot and you get fired, you'll get a golden parachute, $210 million. You'll make in the first 2 hours what people make for the year. But if you went to service to be a policeman, a firefighter, a teacher, a librarian. You'll have to have people sitting around this table and taxpayers that can't afford to live in the town, and you won't either be able to live in the town. Now, Joanne and Robin and I went up to the state to see this Property Tax Reduction Act. We were very excited to see Article 39 that says prevents imposition of mandates without a public hearing, cost determination, and funding. Unfortunately, in 2001, when these 600 pages of No Child Left Behind were made, there's also a funding formula after every single wonderful idea in here. Now we have the basic educational plan, we have the Rhode Island High School diploma system for middle and high school regulations, and then we have my favorite paragraph in here, and I hope to talk to the legislators about it. Education aid increase. The Assembly committed to increasing the state share of education until the state and municipalities equally share the cost of providing local education. In 1985, we all know the Omnibus Tax Reduction Act said if they would give us the money. 1988 amended to 60/40. And I'd like to ask our finance director what Tiverton gets, approximately, according to the state. I know the federal government's 3%. That's why we invited them here tonight. We have to start at the top. But I know your people are here, and I appreciate it, and I hope we can all work together again.
Our state aid equates to about 22% of our overall budget.
22%. Thank you.
Do you have a question?
Well, basically, does that include the reimbursement for construction? Or is that outside of that?
That's our general state aid. With the way Tiverton builds their budget, the general state aid flows through the revenues of the town. Beyond that, outside of that, is the 3% that Sally was speaking about for any federal or restricted state funds that we receive. It's very minimal in Tiverton.
We have not even talked about the impact of the new school constructions when that hits the budget, and that is still an up-in-the-air issue that the treasurer is working on when the impact of the new school construction comes, because it's critical it hits at the right time so that we can get the maximum reimbursement from the state for that fiscal year when that particular building opens up. It is not included in anybody's budget right now in terms of the total impact on the budget. It's just kind of been kept off to the side until we get firmer numbers. We're just talking about the general operating expenses for the town, and I know Robin is talking for the school department. The debt service is off to the side now.
But the maximum
With
could get
regard
up.
to that issue, I think in talking to the treasurer, the state aid and the housing aid that you identified, Representative, that will not be available to the town until the school is completed. That is my understanding. Now, that is subject to absolute confirmation. But for us to take advantage of the 30% school aid for 07 and 08, the elementary school building has to be completed by June 30th. Now, that is an issue that will affect our debt service. It will be made up, but it will be made up in an ensuing year. So that's the problem. I mean, that's because if we go out for permanent financing, and that may not occur, but it will impact the tax rate by a sizable amount.
Prior to this meeting, I met with the architect for the project and with the treasurer to take a look at our funding and where we were as far as substantially completion at June 30th. And right now, everything, it looks like it's on track. The warm weather that we've had has allowed them, I know some people did a walkthrough this afternoon, it's really allowed the construction to move along rapidly. And at this point, they're looking to get the walls up completely so that they can have the interior of the building work being done as the frigid temperatures are coming. So it looks good at this point. Again, there's a difference between substantially complete and certificate of occupancy, and I think we have someone that can probably speak a lot better than I can on that, but it looks like we're on track for that at this point.
Yeah, there's a vast difference between substantial completion is when the architect determines that the building can be used for its intended purpose. Substantial completion is when all the public authorities deem it to be complete.
And it could be several months.
There could be a lag in between.
Yeah.
The certificate of occupancy needs to be issued after, too, right?
Well,
You
a
have
temporary
to use it,
certificate,
yes.
Yeah.
a temporary certificate of occupancy can be issued, because that was what was done, I believe, with the high school, while some issues were wrapped up in the high school.
That's for a punch.
State of Rhode Island
That's
does not
not
issue
fine.
temporary certificates of
Yeah,
occupancy.
has to have a certificate of occupancy where it's determined to be usable by the building official.
That is one thing I think our legislators can track is the housing aid available to Tiverton
Usually it's a
for
temporary.
07, 08, and if there's any deviation that would allow for either substantial completion as distinguished from a certificate of occupancy, I think we would like you to track that because it will impact our budget substantially. That's a cautionary note.
Just to follow that up, I know a couple members here earlier today did take a tour of the school. The roofs are on, and they are in the process of putting up the walls. Probably a quarter of the walls facing the main entrance have been put up, and they're making good progress. So it's pretty much hitting all the timelines that our architect had projected, so we will keep track of that, that's for sure. But it is progressive, and the warm weather, we have caught a break. I mean, knock on wood, we've been very fortunate in that regard.
Steve?
I just asked a question about the status of the power plant company that, we know went through bankruptcy. Has there been any update? Has it been taken over by another company? Will we be receiving typical revenues that the prior company gave us, or will we be potentially going for a higher revenue share from the new company?
There is a tax stabilization agreement in place. The company has been turned over to a trustee that is operating it, and they are paying their taxes in a timely fashion. So that issue that was an issue that we were facing last year is right now off the table. We don't see any problem. They are producing power. The one bright note in all of this issue is that this is the last year. We have a payment actually on the industrial park. So this budget coming up next year is the last payment on the industrial park. Then the industrial park will be paid off for the town of Tiverton.
Would it be safe to say then that their fee structure for that, the revenue coming in from that company is similar to what it was before?
No, it increases on a CPI. That is, it's a very complicated formula that takes into consideration consumer price indexes of the Boston region and salaries. It has been averaging about 3% increase a year. I believe the amount that we're projecting in this year in revenue is somewhere in the neighborhood of about $650,000.
The reason that number isn't substantially more is because of the tax breaks that they get when they come into the state of Rhode Island. EDC, has programs in place where the town's not allowed to tax the manufacturing equipment and the computers to run the manufacturing equipment, which takes your tangible taxes and substantially reduces what you're allowed to charge a company like that. And that's the reason the figure is where it is at the $600,000, despite some people saying that the plant's worth, $40 million or whatever the value of the plant is. We have no way to tax the equipment in that facility, and that's why it generates the approximately $640,000, $650,000 a year. Which, by the way, is approximately, I think the $340-some thousand is the industrial park debt, so it's still a plus $260,000 or so to the town.
One of the things that, and I don't think we're quite there, but I want to raise it anyway, is that if the school department or the council is over the cap, that process of waiver has to start. And it has to start before financial town meeting. Hopefully, on the municipal side, we will not seek that. But we may have to seek it anyway for the debt service.
They're going to wait. Last year, they were waiting for, we put the request in, as you may recall, at the end of January.
Yes.
And then they came back and said, we needed more substantive information
Yeah.
before we would even begin to enter into these discussions.
I know, I understand. But it's not something that we want to go to the financial town meeting and, oops, it's a problem. So.
Any other comments?
I believe it's 60 days. I think that's somewhere in the neighborhood. I think it's 60 days notice off the top of my head. But we'll follow up because I think everybody recognizes this is the year we'll probably have to go. And
Well, at least on
for
the
debt
debt
service. For debt service.
Yeah.
Well, the council's going to be looking at our budget. We just got some new numbers this evening from the town administrator. We've got another workshop scheduled for the 29th. So we're going to be looking at what we received. I'm sure the school committee is going to be relooking at what they've received from the superintendent and from Robin. And the budget committee, no doubt, if they haven't, they'll be receiving the whole budget package very shortly. I think, have you received it yet from the administrator? That should be going.
That'll be going out this week.
You'll be getting, the budget committee will be getting it.
The budget committee will be getting the budget package tomorrow. We're putting in final information for them with some additional editorial copy from me as part of the educational process. And then I told, mentioned to Robin, because and to Bill, we'll be giving over a full packet of information with some editorial copy that you have also gotten as part of your council budget presentation, so it'll be easier to understand. We may not give you all the background data, but just some editorial copy that goes along with it, section by section, you know.
The reason why I'm touching base on that is I think that, it may be prudent of all of us to maybe start looking at our calendars and maybe, we may want to look at it and get together sometime during February or,
I was thinking early March.
maybe even early March again and seeing what we can do. Hopefully everyone can come back and say, hey, we've, gotten a handle on maybe on the insurance side of it a little bit, or hopefully. Wishful thinking.
We could,
It'd be wonderful
I
if
think
our
we have a-
legislators came back and said that they found
they
some
have all
money.
this
but-
money
yeah,
for
right.
us.
It's actually a truck
Looking
outside.
at Joe's face, I don't believe they're going to find money.
That $3,800 per pupil,
I don't think so.
Before we get to a date, despite the fact that we said we would ask our legislators to sort of give us a little bit of an overview of what they see the budget picture this year, and whether, and how they view the state aid to communities, and who would like to lead off on that?
you're all looking at 2 against 1.
Being a minority member here this evening, which is unusual, I guess I can speak for the part of the legislators as we start the process. But as you know, our process is just beginning. We have not received the governor's recommended budget, which is the template which we work on, and the governor's working on that as we speak. There's debate about whether it's due this Thursday or whatever, but that's not of importance in the fact that we face the same problems you face. In terms of your health care, we have health care costs. As far as your personnel, we have personnel costs. As far as your fuel cost, we have fuel cost. So the issues are basically the same, it's just over a bigger magnitude. What you have to remember from a state's perspective is that the state runs a 6.3, and I'm not really prepared for all these numbers, but I can give you estimates from working at the budget because of the fact I just found out about at 5:30 that we had a meeting here today, this evening. I guess the Pony Express to Warren is a little bit slow, so we hopefully can provide better input for you the next time we meet. But basically the budget is about $6.3 billion. We receive half in federal and other aid. So we work with what we call our general revenue expenditures, which is probably about $3.2 billion. And again, revenues are offset by expenditures. Now, if you look at it from a purely revenue perspective, because as the revenues increase, then you can increase your expenditures. We basically have three main sources of our revenues, one being the personal income tax, which everyone works and contributes to, which is probably about $1.1 billion. Then we have the sales tax, which is $900 million, which is your 7% sales tax that everyone pays as they buy commodities. Those two entities comprise about 61% of our general expenditures. You add on the lottery, which is projected, and the projections fluctuate, which is probably around $350 to $330 million. The initial projections were probably $350, which was another 11%. So as you can see, as the budget's put together, 73% of our budget is based on those three entities. Now, how do you increase those entities? By economic development, obviously. The more people you can get working in the state, the more revenues you're going to have, the more expenditures those people are going to spend on, which would increase your sales tax. Other than that, you have your gasoline tax, your other taxes that amount to the other 20-something percent. Or 27%. Now you look at your expenditure portions. We, like you, look at cutting back our employees. So we've cut back from 16,000 to maybe 15,000 and looking at aspects to decrease those particular things. But one of the aspects that really hit us big too are the pension cost, which hit you. People have to realize that they're going to have to realize that they may not be able to retire at a certain age with a certain benefit over a certain life expectancy. And that's something that the legislature is going to have to seriously look at because those costs have increased astronomically. As the health care costs and other costs increase, we have to look for ways in terms of decreasing our own expenditures. Over the years, we provided more state aid for municipalities, and that's been something we look forward to giving the communities. But unfortunately, in this particular year, I don't know how we're going to do that when our projected revenues are decreased by and anticipated expenditures by that $100 million that you read about in the paper. The next aspect, obviously, is based on those increases or potential increases in expenditures. How do you offset that with potential increases in revenues? And are those revenue increases there in the three entities that I mentioned, the income tax, the sales tax? So now the legislature has to look at ways of, do we want to increase the base of those revenue sources? Do we increase the basis of our sales tax, for instance, to include other aspects or not? And what are the risk rewards in terms of doing those? The governor's got the difficult job of presenting that initial template to the legislature. And until we know that, we're not going to have a grasp of where we stand in terms of how do we pick and choose one item over another item, or one program over another program.
Is there any information yet? I know the sales tax, we adopted this uniform sales tax. Does that increase or decrease revenue? Is anybody?
The potential is, I believe, a $1.2 million increase in revenues. That's already been projected in the budget at hand.
Okay.
One of the things I would ask and encourage the school committee to do, as part of the tax cap legislation, as I'm sure you're aware, there is a provision in the legislation that directs the state shall reimburse for state unfunded mandates retroactively to 1992. So that means any state unfunded mandate that was enacted post-1992, the legislation says shall be reimbursed. So I would encourage the school committee to dig into the numbers and try and pull that out. Now, the Department of Administration has published a listing of unfunded mandates as well. One of the things we might look at legislatively is pushing that retroactive date back. As you know, initially when the legislation was talked about, the date was 1987. And so what happened between 1987 and 1992? Well, what happened were a lot of the transportation mandates that we currently face. And those are a big chunk of the state unfunded mandates. So the legislation was changed from 87 to 92. But in the meantime, I would encourage you to get that list from the Department of Administration and to go through and dig out as many of those unfunded mandates as you possibly can. Like I say, the legislation says that you shall be reimbursed for those.
We have the correspondence, John, and I've been to the website. I'm working with some other superintendents. Right now we have 5 pages of unfunded mandates but there are no costs. They list them, thankfully.
Right.
And
but
now
you
we
have to go through and figure out what the impact
and
was.
do an analysis on them. But we are in the process of doing that. It's been helpful to get that because it's been a while in coming, but at least now we know where to go to look.
Well, the projected budget is short by about what? Let's see. You said
about
2.2 overall?
1.6.
I think you got about 1.6 in unfunded mandates.
Well, we certainly do, but whether we get reimbursed is another story.
Well, where's the state going to get the money?
Well, the legislation is very clear. I mean, it says that you shall be reimbursed for that.
Does it say when?
No.
2010.
No, it doesn't.
Tells you when the reports must
Like a grandchild's lifetime.
So it'll be the college before I see it.
Peter Schaefer from the Office of Municipal Affairs spoke at a Rhode Island School Business Officials meeting in late December, and his message to us was we shouldn't expect to see any type of return on that in the next fiscal year because the state's just not prepared information-wise in order to fund any of those mandates. So that was the latest that we heard from the Office of Municipal Affairs. He took a lot of arrows that day
I can
for
well
the
imagine.
office.
Just so the council knows, that same report is in their council packet of information that was given out the other night, so it's already in there. I know the school board has sent another copy around, so it's...
Coventry has also done a fairly substantial analysis in this. I don't know if you have a copy of the
Yeah, that's
Coventry.
what we just got.
But I can get you that if you
We
need.
just
That's
got
what we're
Coventry.
working on.
Okay, good.
Does that
The
apply on the
town
town
may
side
have-
at all, too?
No, it's just educational.
Just
unfunded mandates.
The town staff has been asked to take a look at this and review what benefit, how much of an impact. But I mean, the reality is, a lot of us been in this business for a long time. If you don't have the money, where are you going to find the money to pay for these things? So I guess my feeling as an administrator is not to let people who are watching this later think that somehow this is going to resolve our budget issues this year, but it certainly is a point of discussion with the legislature and with the governor's office.
I'd like to just follow up on that. Just from my perspective as the superintendent of a small suburban school district, this tax cap legislation, and I understand the rationale, is to help the overburdened taxpayer at the local level. However, just by going through our budget, and I didn't like the proposed cuts that you have in your packet either, because I've been here since '98, and like I told the committee,
I've worked very hard with my administrators and teachers to build what we have. And now it looks like we'll have to start taking down what we built. And once you take it down, very rarely does it get put back up. And and I know there's only 3 representatives here, 2 reps and a senator, but we're only the first town to go forward because we have such an early filing period of our budget. I can't imagine we'll be the only one in this position. Other districts may be able to get by a year because they have a bigger budget and maybe they can consolidate better, but we've always gone year to year, hand them out since I've been here. And now with this cap, it gives us there is no, as Glenn said, I want people who are watching this at some later time, there is no magic bullet. There's no going to the public at a town meeting rallying the troops saying we need 9%. This is pretty straightforward stuff. Except if we got a waiver on a mandate, then we would ask the people to vote for it. But things have changed, and I'm very restricted in what I can recommend to my committee. Denise recommended, well, go back and look at it. And as I told her in my last meeting, if you thought these cuts were tough, wait until the second round to get to the 1.3. Because right now I've been able to, with that 500,000 in cuts, keep our core program intact. If I have to go farther, which I may have to, we'll, as I told the committee, probably be in some sort of litigation with somebody, not necessarily the town per se, but the Department of Ed, for not being in compliance possibly, a parent who says you're supposed to have program A, you don't have it. We could be in court over that in the commissioner's office. So this school department is in a real tough spot, more so than I've ever seen. And Robin and I, and I've talked to everyone who I can talk to, there's no magic bullet, no silver bullet to take here. And I just wanted to say that to you folks, so when you go back, you can at least say you talked to some people on the ground, so to speak, that are faced with some. I mean, yeah, I could go to the fuel and go, hope it's warm like this year, and put it at $2.10 a gallon or $2.15 a gallon instead of $2.63. But am I doing a disservice? I mean, in 6 months the committee's going to go, Bill, what the heck are you doing? Why don't we have any fuel? Or can I say, okay, we won't have any new tuitions for special ed. We'll do it at 1%. That's not realistic. And that's not a fair way to budget, an appropriate way to budget. And that's kind of where we're at.
Can I just gain a little better perspective? I worked with municipal budgets for 20 years when I was on the council in Warren, and I'm still trying to grasp the Tiverton concept here in terms of the budget planning and process. The school committee, you didn't present a debt service type of aspect. How does your debt service expenditures come into play? Is that from the town, or how does that work?
Can I answer? The way it worked, it typically was incorporated into the municipal side of the budget, the debt service, which really would skew our numbers from the municipal side, could shoot them off into orbit. Last year, as part of the budget discussion, it was decided with the budget committee we would start treating and taking the debt service aside and deal with the town. The municipal side would present its budget, the school would present its budget, then we would deal with the debt as a separate issue. I mean, with the idea last year of trying to maintain a 5.5% overall increase in the budget. This is not where an administrator or the town manager takes all of the information and then presents it all at once. It comes in portions, and then the budget committee obviously presents it to the at the financial town meeting. So it's a little bit different, and especially with the debt service being a little bit in play this year with how the school buildings were going to come on. We didn't want to come in with numbers that were astronomical or too low, because once numbers get out into the public, they tend to become gospel, and you live with them. And I think that was also the concern.
But the $3.5 million high school bond has been spent, and therefore
that debt service,
the debt service is
the debt service is the debt service.
Right, it's the debt service for that. The elementary school bond is in a position where right now it's a band, which is a bond anticipation note, and it has to do with the completion, and that's why we're all talking about at what time it'll come online. as to when it's due for
Yeah,
a
I
$10 million
understand- I understand
$10 million
that.
payment. But when you're asking about what the debt service is.
Well, I'm
it
just
basically could be-
looking for
but it could be as high on-
where things are located.
What I'm saying, well, it's not there, but
It's
what I'm
not
saying
in
is
our-
it
It's
could
there, all
be
right.
the debt on 13 million, or the debt on 3.5, plus a pot.
Because one of the aspects on municipal budgeting is you'd like to have a straight curve in terms of your debt service. You don't like to see roller coasters, because then it causes an artificial tax rate, because it can go up and down dramatically. What you'd like to do in terms of long-term budget planning is to plan where your expenditures are going to be consistent, so your debt service is not the roller coaster that it can be.
Well, that's-
But obviously,
that
there's
is-
some circumstances that
Right.
cause
Well,
it to be.
I mean, we have, I think, done that as a community, but when the school bond passed for 30 million, I think it's the largest bond issue. The issue that we have is how to phase that in so that it's not too costly for the town, and yet it is phased in so it's more gradual. So the issues that the treasurer has, and some of us have been trying to work with the treasurer, is if the last payment on the industrial bonds of $325,000 is paid off in '08, okay? If the elementary school bond issue, if that housing aid is available, then that will help. But if it isn't available, then the impact of
We get the spike.
yeah, you'll have the spike, and we're trying to,
Take the sting out.
exactly. So, and that is an issue, it's a function of rates and term and all those wonderful things that
Getting
play
it
into
back,
it.
No,
but getting it back is nice, but it's still, it's due at a
Right.
particular
Yeah.
time, and that doesn't always work out to be so that they coincide.
My next general question is in regard to, I assume that the school gets budgeted independently from the town, or is it all one?
It's all one
audit?
meeting.
Yes.
In terms of any potential under expenditure, or let me turn the phrase surplus, how is that taken care of in terms of the school budget, and how's it taken care of in the town budget?
As far as the
Does
fund
it-
balance,
right,
typically we
of-
come in somewhere between $8,000 and $12,000 every year. And that 8 and 12,000 is timing differences in bills, so we spend pretty much, every dollar that we receive in a fiscal year. And as you can see, most of our monies are in benefits and salaries, so there's not a lot of play, so to speak, in our budget. So that would be considered our fund balance. But I think the reason that you're not seeing the budget that you're expecting is because the school department is not the taxing authority in the town, so we're just one line item within their budget. So
Okay.
maybe what what you'll see there as a total will roll into the town's entire budget, which includes the debt.
And at that point, if I have a copy of last year's financial town meeting approved docket, which I've got an extra copy, and I think that would help you. Right now, we are operating as separate units, and which is the way we are, putting together our budgets and expenditures. And the council is going to be talking about revenue projections and where we think we could possibly increase revenue, where we think revenue is going to grow, and try to address some of the increases that we need in that way in terms of normal growth of revenues that you would see in just like the state government sees. It normally goes up because as more people spend money, the numbers go up. So we're looking at that also, but we do not have our revenue. You just have a snapshot of the expenditure, our proposed expenditure reports right now. But you don't have a complete copy of a budget that normally that you would see probably in March from the town, March or April, when revenues are starting to be looked at, expenditures in the budgeting process. Now, this year, we are trying to get the revenue issue addressed much earlier than it was last year, where it was addressed more in end of April, early May. We're trying to have it a full-scale discussion at the end of January, early February. And that'll assist the Budget Committee in their deliberations also.
In your last fiscal audit, what was your, do you have a surplus or not?
Yes, we do have a surplus. Our audit, and in fact, our audit is underway right now because we have a month extension to address some issues. We've changed auditors this year to take a fresh look at the audit. So we're waiting for our final numbers.
Can I ask a question? I am under the impression, I think I read this someplace, that the municipal side of the budget is also entitled to reimbursement for mandated programs. I believe I read that the General Assembly appropriated something like $300 million for those reimbursements, and that less than 50% of the communities are applying for them. But are those reimbursements still available? Can we get those into our budget planning if we apply for them? I'm thinking right now off the top of my head of the mandate for creating and manning a fire marshal sub-department or whatever. That's a rather expensive addition to our budget. It's mandated. I'm not sure just how the mandate is worded. I'm inclined to say if the law requires that we establish the positions, we'll go ahead and do it, and then we won't be able to fill those positions because we don't have the money to pay whoever would get into those, be appointed to those positions. And so, is there another possibility here of assistance for the municipal side of the budget?
What we'd have to do is we'd have to just bring your question back and talk to the budget folks and get that. To isolate and understand exactly what you're looking for is any sort of state-level program that allows for the reimbursement of unfunded municipal mandates. Is that correct? Okay.
The burden that's been put on our local fire department since the Warwick fire, with plan reviews and inspections and everything else, and with our deputy fire marshals, has really eaten up our overtime and has put such a burden on our fire department. It's unbelievable that it's looking that in this budget that the requests have been put in for a full-time deputy fire marshal just to do plan reviews and inspections. And we now have people that we have to pay overtime just for plan reviews. I think, Glenn, we just went through that at the last budget request, at the last budget meeting, where at one time, you just had someone go in and just do a regular smoke inspection when you went and purchased a house. Now, if you're building a house, you have to have someone actually sit down and review the plans before you even get the building permit as part of the process. And then once the house is built, to get your certificate of occupancy, they have to go in and do the smoke inspection. So with commercial buildings, they have to go through the whole plan review.
And there's, for instance, a fee that is established by the state to cover those costs, and those fees are frankly too low to recover our expenses. There is a fee that's established by the state when I was mentioning that earlier.
I'm sure if you talk with the school department, they could probably tell you how many times they've had to meet with the fire department to talk over the plan reviews for the new schools. And that itself will tell you just the burden that's been put on the fire department, not just in the town of Tiverton, but throughout the state. And that's something that's been a burden that's been passed on. And that's just one department, one position. So that's what Mr. Costa is referring to. If you look in reimbursement just on an education side, then by all means on the municipal side, we're taking a whack too.
Because the other large one that we have facing the town is the stormwater too.
Federal.
That's federal.
Yeah.
Another mandate.
Another, we gotta get a different group of
right here
people.
about stormwater drainage.
We gotta get a different group for that.
That's
Okay,
why
so
we
Gotta beat up somebody different to get that one.
No,
Stormwater
but this one
management
here
was.
is in what Glenn had given us the other day for the state mandates, and it says here the storm drainage system. That's part of the small municipal separate storm water sewer system must be implemented here.
That could be, I'm not sure what that is, but it could also be where you have the separation of combined sewer and stormwater systems. I'm not so sure that would that does not apply to us since we don't have any combined sewer and stormwater systems.
Okay, I think we probably exhausted ourselves at this point, but...
And I'm going to suggest that we make another meeting. I'm thinking March would probably be more realistic for the school department. You know, does that sound?
Early March, because I think we...
You people are meeting on the 13th, right?
We're meeting on the 13th and the 27th. Are you meeting on the 12th?
We meet on the 12th and the 26th.
Yeah.
I only recommend it in early, if you're looking at early March, because I believe we meet with the budget committee mid-March.
Yes, we do.
Somewhere in that second, no later than that third week in March. So I haven't received any dates, but that's normally when we get together.
I do want to say that once March starts, many of us are on committees at the State House that doesn't last to 8, 9 o'clock at night. So I'd love to be there, but I think realistically, I think we have committee assignments that we have to attend to in March. The other thing, too, is I would suggest that if there are issues relative to like the substantial completion phase, that would be most helpful to us if we can get a resolution from the council. The sooner the better. Then we can introduce that as legislation. It has a little bit more weight because it has a very pertinent impact on the town.
Yep.
And there might be other towns that are in the same situation because there was a lot of building bonds that we passed in the last 2 years. So we might be able to get more support. So if you can send us a resolution, then we can run with it and see if we can get other towns' representatives to support it.
Yeah, we need to have a clearer understanding of what, and also what the existing requirement is. Is it CO, a certificate of occupancy, is it substantial completion?
You want to get substantial completion because you can actually achieve that without a CO.
Yeah.
Substantial completion.
Yeah.
But if you get a CO, you automatically achieve substantial completion.
Yeah.
But I think the question remains, though,
What the
what's the
existing-
requirement? What's the existing
What's the
statute
existing
requires? It
requirement?
requires
Yes.
substantial completion of
Yeah,
substantial
we have a better chance of being substantially complete than having a CO.
Yes.
So let's find
Much
out
better
what this,
chance.
yeah, so let's find out.
We did the Portsmouth Gym, we were actually able to achieve substantial completion on June 30th. And we didn't actually get a CO.
Just
But you
to
got me
point out
reimbursed.
while we're doing calendar
John,
stuff as well.
or, can you find out their existing requirement
I've got a note to do
for the
that.
state,
Yes,
and
ma'am.
then let us know?
Absolutely.
Okay. Because we can react then.
While we're doing calendar, I just wanted to point out that the last day for Senate public bill introduction, obviously it doesn't affect town-specific bills, is Thursday, February 8th. And the last day for House public bill introduction is Thursday, February 15th. And so the last day for House committees to consider bills is going to be Thursday, April 12th, and the same for the Senate. So just to kind of keep those in mind, obviously town bills can come in at any time, but if you can meet that deadline, it's always helpful to do that.
Well, do we have a date? Is it March 14th?
March 14th is a Wednesday.
Sure.
Is that,
Wednesdays are better. I mean, the Finance Committee, from my perspective, we meet every Tuesday and Thursday, so.
Wednesday the 14th.
You meet every Wednesday.
Yeah, I meet every Wednesday.
how is March 14th?
Yeah, Wally's got a good handle on this, so.
Okay. March 14th it is.
Good.
Yes. Here in the library.
I think you're not showing up.
And everyone's invited.
You built an excuse.
And
Why don't you tell them schedule a Tuesday?
Yeah,
That's what
Tuesday,
that's what
yeah.
he did for Wednesday.
I'm not quite sure if all the budget committee members were notified, but Jeff, do you have a meeting before? You do have a meeting.
Yeah, we better be meeting by then, yeah.
Well, I would hope so. So would you please tell them about
Sure,
this meeting?
I'll make a note of that.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Second.